All right. Well, wow. What an important day this is, honestly, for the Wolf and Bull podcast.
Transcontinental.
It really is. And, first off, I just got to welcome our listeners. It's wonderful when we have you guys tune up and show up and tune into our episodes. And we have a wonderful episode in store for you. This is your friendly neighborhood Wolf speaking, and sitting across from me, perched majestically on his metaphorically physical hill is...
Metaphorically, it's always been real.
Well, the bull.
The bull is
sitting across from me. Yeah, he is. And what a wonderful day. And boy, oh boy, our podcast is going to be so exciting today. We have our first, not currently in the studio with us, but in our hearts just the same, across the pond guest, Ian, a.k.a. the host of BAA-RAM-EWE podcast, doing what would technically be amounted to a swapcast with us today.
Yeah. Hi, guys. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure. I've been looking forward to this one. Chemtrails has been a show that I've wanted to do and I've been asked to do recently as well. So this is a first for me, and obviously with experience in talking about things, you'll only get better. But I'm really excited to come on and do a swapcast with you guys. I'm always happy to build relationships with other podcasters that are in the same field, whether it be people who agree or people who disagree. It's always fun.
Yeah, and I have to say, I really appreciate that about your podcast. I think that's a breath of fresh air, in my opinion. There's not enough conversation going on when it comes to people who, maybe not even differing views, but have like adjacent views or views that are, relatively compatible or maybe even not.
A lot of the podcasts you listen to today or videos you watch are an echo chamber. They're one cadre of people or one group that all believes the same thing, and they're all tightly aligned, and it's interesting and it's good informationally. Yeah, but it's always better to hear kind of not necessarily opposing views, but at least tangential views to this.
Yep. Well, and Ian, would you prefer that I refer to you as Ian or BAA-RAM-EWE?
I don't mind. Okay. I'm glad
this is sort of an animal podcast, so you know.
Okay, you're actually one of the first ones that said it right. It's BAA-RAM-EWE. You're right. Most people say BAA-RAM-EWE, and I'm like, the reference is I don't know if you remember the film from the 90s, Babe, with the pig that thinks it's a sheepdog, and remember at the very end of the competition where the pig goes to competition and the sheep won't budge for him. So the sheepdog runs back to its own farm and says, look, he needs help. And the password is BAA-RAM-EWE. So it's I thought it's fitting because it's the password of the sheep. So I love it.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's, I was going to ask that question. Like, where did he come up with this name?
Yeah.
And that's awesome.
Yeah. So before we jump in chemtrails, which is the topic today, we're going to discuss a little in depth, a few other things as well, like HAARP and the birds aren't real conspiracy, which will be fun. But Ian, we'd love to know a little bit more.
That wolf? Why did you even laugh about the wolf? Birds not being real. I can't believe you even chuckled.
I want to make sure the people are watching don't catch on to me. I believe they aren't. So, but that's I absolutely love the origin story of that. I would love to know how you originally got into podcasting. A little bit of background on where your interests lie there for our listeners. That way, people can utilize your information, entertainment, as a resource down the road.
Awesome. Well, it's always my favorite story to add, and I'm sure my listeners are sick of me telling this story, but for your guys' listeners, I went on a kind of a self-educating journey. Like I was fed up listening to music at work, the same 10 songs on repeat, and some guy that I was working with said, why don't you start listening to podcasts? So I took an interest in politics, first and foremost. That was the time of the independent vote with Scotland leaving England, and then it was Brexit. So I was kind of developing my worldview on politics. And then I got into philosophy, which I still have a soft spot for. I think it's really benefited me when I've gone into conspiracy theories. When you debate people, I think I take a lot from my background in philosophy, because a lot of the arguments we see in politics and, with the way the world is with like the SJWs, the liberals, and like the arguments, the cognitive dissonance, for example, my body, my choice is okay for abortion argument, but not for the vaccine argument. So when you look into like philosophy, you can just deconstruct that argument just by saying that. Like it's really stood me in a good stead. And then the conspiratorial side of me was, I was at a house party one night. This guy came up to me and told me that he believed the earth was flat. And I had never, everyone knows about aliens. We all see the UFO shows on TV late at night, and everyone knows about the 9/11 one, but the vast majority of them I'd never came across. And then this guy tells me that people believe the earth is flat, and I'm 30 years of age at this time, and I'm going, why have I never came across a flat earther or this online? I'm on Facebook, I'm on YouTube, like I've never seen it. So that's what started me down the rabbit hole, and it's gone from flat earth to JFK to 9/11 to my favorite stuff is like the cult stuff, the Skull and Bones, Illuminati, Freemasons. So I kind of like doing that, but I'm just a bit of everything. I'm not as consistent as maybe you guys are, or some of the people that I follow, where they're blasting out episodes once a week. But I am very active. I'm on Podbean a lot in the chat rooms, and if there's any show that I feel I've performed well in or that could be useful, I'll ask the person to send me it, and I'll publish it as like a swapcast or whatever. But I am, I need to get moving with some of the more BAA-RAM-EWE stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love that insight. I think the most incredible thing about that, in my opinion, is that you went through a journey that led you to, your podcast and talking about these topics. And my journey just resulted in me being bored. Which, you know what? I think they both have value in different ways, but I like yours a lot more than mine.
Hey, don't let the wolf fool you here, because he's not just bored. He is on a journey as well. If you listen to a few of our podcasts, you can feel the thread of him learning.
I'm soul searching.
You're soul searching. And into philosophy quite a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Psychology and philosophy. As you said, Ian, the rabbit hole, man, it's deep.
Yeah.
It is deep, and
it is wild.
Yeah, exactly. But it's fun. And the interesting thing about conspiracy theories in general is that when time goes by and you start looking back at some of these things, some of the stuff people thought was completely ridiculous and had no credence at all in our world today.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of edges of truth around this stuff.
Yeah.
Whether they're whole cloth correct and true, probably not a lot of the time, but there's always something real in there.
Look, if you'd have told me in 2018 that we would have all collectively decided to stop everything for a few years for the thing that must not be named, I would have laughed in your face. Just saying. That's I'm alluding. I don't want to get taken down.
Happen? Did that happen at all, or was it part of the Matrix?
Does anything ever happen? That's the real question.
That is exactly.
But yeah, so let's go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to go ahead and start the episode off with a quick little monologue. Reason being because I love hearing my voice. And so I'm going to jump right into it. And after that, we can just open up to discussion and really dive into this chemtrails topic, because this is something that I've been aware of, but I have not ever dove into as deep as I did in the few hours that I spent doing this. And now I'm a believer, honestly, with everything that's happened.
There's 100%. A lot of logic in this particular subject.
And what's funny, and we'll get into this, but what's funny is all the excuses from all the people who are a part of the cabal. They are all just like, oh yeah, no, it's just just don't really use the logical part of your brain. Go ahead and just ignore all of that and believe what we say, which is great. But anyway, we're gonna jump right into this monologue. It's currently 1996. Baggy jeans are in style. Macarena by the Los Del Rio, the Bayside Boys remix, is somehow the #1 song on Billboard magazine's top 100 songs of 1996. Prince Charles and Diana, Princess of Wales, got divorced. I believe it was in August. Nintendo released its N64 in Japan, and mad cow disease hit Britain. What an interesting series of events from 1996.
I think they're all related.
Oh, probably 100%. So you happen to look at the sky and boom, contrails behind planes appear. You've never seen them before. They linger and they're strange in color, and it sticks in your mind briefly as you drive to McDonald's, the only restaurant to power the United States in its entirety in the mid to late 1990s. On an included in the monologue side note, I actually checked this out and researched this, and the fast food joint which was most popular in 1995 was Starbucks. McDonald's was in 1997. Apparently 1996 just was, as I like to say, removed from the annals. I know it's an als, but I'll say annals of history. And so, I guess the people of 1996 were removed as well. And, the article itself was titled the most popular fast food the year you were born. So someone had to put that together. But again, in 1996, the Dallas Cowboys won the Super Bowl, the Yankees won the Baseball World Series, and the world had a collective stroke deciding to hold the Summer Olympics in the sweatiest summer place of all time, Atlanta, Georgia, resulting in, yes, you guessed it, the USAF letting the cat out of the bag by publishing a report on controlling the weather, sparking the minds, hearts, and souls of conspiracy theorists everywhere. The idea of chemtrails was born.
Very nicely done, Wolf.
Thanks.
Yes, very nice.
Yeah, well done.
I had fun putting that together.
Sometimes it's good to provide context of the time surrounding the conspiracy. I think a lot of them, when I've tried to get into, especially the moon landing one, I have no idea what was going on in the 60s. But it's like for someone like me to go back and, get some references to what was going on, it really helps.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So now, a few minutes ago, you said you were in your 30s or early 30s, right? When you were kind of doing this journey of self-discovery. Yeah. So what does that pin you at now? About 34?
Oh, I'm 34. Yeah,
34. So well, I don't even want to tell you how old the bull is. The bull is of another
biblical times.
Biblical, yes, exactly. No, I'm a boomer, baby boomer. Now 34. Let me see. Wolf and you are both of the. Is that the same?
I'm 30.
Well, I know, but is it the same generational thing? Because there's
80,
definitely
88. Yeah.
So there's definitely a viewpoint that a certain age group has on stuff.
Well, why wouldn't we? I mean, think about it. So this is something that I'm sure you've heard us harp on, Ian. I specifically harp on it. The spread of technology has blown all these things up to such a high degree that I would argue it would be impossible to find someone anywhere on the planet that does not have some opinion or belief when it comes to anything conspiracy related.
It's either some opinion or no opinion. In other words, their entire life revolves around other people's opinions and just nodding their head yes, or putting a check mark beside something, or putting a square on their Facebook, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Which is interesting. That always, I wouldn't say it bothers me, but it makes things really boring. I like to have discussions with people that are insightful as opposed to just regurgitation of, hot topic positions. But yeah, so chemtrails, definitely something that I think a lot of people are aware of. And, during my research, I found that there's a vast spread of opinion on this. And all of it tends to be either one way, being from like the government saying, don't believe any of it. And the other way being it from people saying, believe all of it. And I think that I find that particularly interesting.
If the government says don't believe any of it, we can automatically believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the thing, right?
Yeah, 100%. So Ian, what's your position on this, just officially, before we dive into any of the research? Where would you align yourself with chemtrails specifically?
I have a little bit of reference I've wrote down here. My introduction is I do remember in the midnight. Well, you're saying 96, so maybe it was 96. Mm-hmm. I specifically remember playing football with my friends out in the fields, and after the game, lying down, staring up at the clouds, and seeing these planes with a straight line of smoke or whatever it is at the back, and we all just used to like talk about it, like, what is that? And up until I heard about chemtrails, I assumed it was like rich people with like jets that could go at super speeds, because clearly to me they weren't passenger planes, because not every plane had these straight lines of smoke. So that was just the way I thought. Like, if it's a young age, it's like, well, they're different to them. So what is that? And I just put it down to maybe some rich people that could afford these planes and were just cruising on a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon. But then obviously once I got into conspiracies and for me, the main piece of information, the confirmation piece that I certainly look at, is the John Brennan, director of the CIA, admitting it. So for me, I always use a percentage to explain where I am on a conspiracy, and I'm 95. This is a definite for me. They are spraying the sky. It's for me, this is not a conspiracy theory anymore, because they've confirmed it so much. Where the gray area is what they're actually doing by spraying the sky, and what are the methods and what are the causation of what they're doing. That's the gray area for me.
Yeah, I would probably say I'm prior to the last few years, Ian, I would probably say that I was at the like 10% level of like, maybe not. I'm probably at the 80% level now. And it's not because of my 2 hours of research late at night, drinking alcohol, determining that this is what I'm going to talk about. It is merely because of the last few years has been an absolute cluster when it comes to decision making and just odd things.
By the way, Ian, he's saying late at night drinking alcohol, and I just watched him take a big guzzle of
it's 9:56. It is 9:56 and I'm drinking a raspberry sour. That's how we do things in Arizona. How about you, Bo? Where do you find yourself on this?
I've always been kind of a 50-50 guy on all these. And what I tend to see with a lot of these conspiracy theories is people gather up some information that can be construed or twisted or spun in a direction for or against these kind of things.
Yeah.
And then they kind of dive into it very emotionally because they're tied to it. Somebody personally is involved with this, or they're just so anti-government that they believe this, and this, and I've history tells you, if you read a history book about any of the wars or any different kind of conflicts between different, whether it's nations or groups or banks or all the different things we could talk about in the world today, there is always someone that has come up with a way to circumvent kind of normal methods, normal processes. And so I don't put anything by our governmental agencies. I mean, everybody knows, DARPA. DARPA has come up with more experiments over the course of time than I don't know, of any other agency. Probably the UK started all this, so we've got to blame you and your country.
Whoa! No, we blame the Brits. That's where we can align. We blame Britain.
There you go. Well, that works for me. But I'm no longer 50-50. I'm kind of with you, Wolf, on this. Is that some of the stuff I've seen over the course of the last 3 years, and I've always been jaded about certain things, especially in the business world, but the way people have turned everybody psychologically into freaking lemmings, has told me that a lot of these things are true. Now, Ian, you made a great point, though. The question isn't whether something is actually happening. The question is why. The methodology. What is it really for? And then you could take the idea that they're trying to protect you against sun flares and things like that, or you could take the further position that they're when you were laying in that field looking up at the sky, you were getting hallucinogenics rained down on you, right? So you can take all those positions.
Well, he saw Epstein in the plane. I mean, that's right. What it was.
That was
He's flying to the pedophile island.
That's exactly what it was.
That honestly, that's what really pushed me over the edge. I don't know if you saw that documentary on Jeffrey Epstein, but when they went into his egg-shaped appendage, I immediately switched on so many things because I was like, how is it that we don't know if this guy killed himself, but we know what his appendage looks like?
Well, who else was on the plane, right?
Oh, so many people.
Prince,
many people.
Which one was it?
Was it Charles?
Andrew.
Thank you. I was going to get it wrong too. Oh God! Oh, what an American thing to say.
Hey! I've been to Scotland, Edinburgh specifically. I absolutely love it there. So I say there's a little bit of kinship. I'm actually Irish. I know we have a history.
Ian, he's wearing a kilt right now.
I am.
Nice.
Yeah, I actually just specifically wear kilts wherever I go. We did leg day this morning at the gym, and I was wearing a kilt. It was really awkward for everybody. But or maybe it was a good.
It was
thing.
Awkward for everybody because you did it true Scottish style with the kilt,
that's the only way to do it. The only way to do it. But yeah, no, I think that is it definitely. It's insightful, especially Bolts. Back to your point of how much the last few years have shifted some people. Now, I want to preface this for our listeners. I am very cautious on some of the things that I believe wholeheartedly and some of the things that I can say has some credibility here. And when it comes to chemtrails, I think there could be some credibility. Now, I happen to be a little bit of a masochist, so I want to start on the negative Nancy side of things, specifically with an organizational research group out of Harvard that has a very, very opinionated position on chemtrails. Now, this organizational research group, specifically David Keith, I'm looking at you, David. I don't know what you had, what power you had with your writing from Harvard, but specifically you were very opinionated, apparently. And I'm just going to quote some things from the website. He specifically says, chemtrails refer to the theory that governments or other parties are engaged in a secret program to add toxic chemicals to the atmosphere from aircraft in a way that forms visible plumes in the sky, somewhat similar to contrails. Various different motivations for this alleged spraying are speculated, including sterilization, reduction of life expectancy, mind control, and weather control. And these goobers over at Harvard also decided to very poignantly state, we have not seen any credible evidence that chemtrails exist. If we see any evidence that governments were endangering their own citizens in the manner alleged in the Chemtrails Conspiracy, we would be eager to expose and stop any such activities. Really? Really? You would? We should ask John Hopkins what their opinion is on that, because the last few years they've been pretty back and forth on some
actually
things.
I think that statement is kind of hilarious when you even without the context of the last few years, we would know if somebody was endangering its own citizens, and we'd do something about it. Really? Yeah. Come on now.
The only way I can imagine the person writing this is like in the most Chad bro way. Like, we would totally see this coming, bro. Like, honestly, like, we're so up in arms against any endangering against the citizenry of any country that we would definitely blow the whistle on this one, fam. But honestly, we don't see anything. That's how I imagine it. And I'm pretty sure it's accurate, you know? That's just my position on it. Yeah, it's good. So what are your guys' thoughts on that? Do you think Harvard, or specifically the educational industry, you think it should be trusted in this category?
Not at all. For me, it's like where there's money, there can always be corruption. And that's another thing. A lot of skeptics. I had a couple of skeptics on my show, and we kind of debated around all these conspiracy theories, and we came to the conclusion that they believed in corruption, whereas I believe in like conspiracy for a greater cause. So they're just thinking it's men in suits making decisions based on their money in their pockets and their well-being. And to me, I see that as a win, because even that should wake people up. And that's basically what a conspiracy theorist's job is to do, or if there is such a thing, is to spread this information, get it out there. And, you know, we all just want a better way of life. And this is like probably like, as I'm researching chemtrails, which I've never done before, although I knew about it, I'm realizing how much it really does affect our lives on a daily basis even. And it is actually really important. Like if you was to put the top 10 conspiracies of which ones are like the ones you really need to wake people up about, I would have this up there. And it seems that I think a lot of people do know about them. It's just the way we are, we're so demoralized that we just allow this stuff to go on because, what the hell, we'll be dead soon kind of attitude.
Well, it's one of those things that's right in front of our faces all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, who hasn't seen them, right? And of course, you know, over the length of like you guys' lives, this has been a commonality. You've seen it almost all your lives.
Yeah.
And for me, you know, I didn't look up and see those things at all.
Well, I just know, like when I was younger, learning about flight and aviation in school, I saw all the photos with Wilbur and Auroral, right? And they had the chemtrails coming off the planes.
That's right.
Like, well, here's my thing is I would probably align in my position of saying some planes are probably, you know, maybe some sort of atmospheric pressure or water condensation.
That's condensation.
And then the other ones, ones, maybe not so much.
But you think about this a second, okay? Contrails are real things.
Yeah.
Condensation trails. But the reason they happen is because you're going through something with either more or less temperature between yourself and the plane itself, certain altitudes, certain wind directional stuff. There's atmospheric pressure differences. All those kind of things can create water droplets, right?
You're starting to sound like David Keith. You're starting to sound like David Keith right now. You're the research guy.
No,
hey, wait a second.
My point is there can be both. You can have, but the big thing that pushed me over the edge and put me above that 50% I talked about is the length of time these things stay in the air. That's what you see. You can see planes going back and forth, and they're up there a long time. These chemtrails.
Yeah.
I actually have this written down. If you bear with me, I've got the 5 reasons that chemtrails are not contrails. Number 1, visibility of trails on satellite photos. The massive water vapor contained in a standard contrail would be tiny and certainly would not be observable from 150 miles up in the sky. Number 2, time of trail persistence. Vapor trails from aircraft should never persist for more than about 2 minutes, even in ideal atmospheric conditions. This is clearly demonstrated from various time-lapse footage. Number 3, irregular pattern of appearance. The frequency of appearance of trails does not bear any noticeable relationship to the levels of civilian aircraft. Number 4, number of trails seen simultaneously at a given time. It is not possible to have such a high level of civilian or military air traffic, even during an exercise, which would generate the observed number of trails. On heavy spray days, the sky is filled with lines through. On other days, the sky is clear. So basically, does the airport just close on certain days and no planes? You know what I mean? Our skies are clear on certain days, but on others, there's all these grid lines and patterns. And then number 5, broken trails. In many cases, instances of broken trails are seen, and these breaks are also persistent. If the trail was a contrail, that would indicate that the engine had momentarily stopped burning fuel. These breaks often look deliberate to make a grid-like pattern. And then I've got also note that the exhaust comes from the entire wingspan compared to contrails. There's various images of planes with no seats inside them, just huge tanks. That was like a huge moment when I saw those. I don't know if you've seen those images of the inside of these planes.
Oh yeah.
Have you guys ever seen the big planes, the 747s they have for firefighting out in California and such?
Yeah.
Where I can't remember the name of the substance they use, the orangish substance. I should know it off the top of my head.
Agent Orange.
Yeah, maybe.
It really does a good job of putting out those fires, those that aren't intentionally started. Wink, wink.
Well, that's a whole nother podcast right there, guys.
Yeah.
But the whole point is that you see to Ian's point, especially with the brakes, whether you're talking about crop dusting or firefighting or whatnot.
Yeah, fire retardant.
Well, I know it's fire retardant, but there's a specific name for it.
That's too much.
But anyway, any event, you see that same thing.
FOS check.
FOS check. That's what it's called. Yeah. FOS check. And when these planes are flying over, you'll see them do a release, and this broad spectrum of stuff falls out, and then there's a break, and then they'll circle around and release again. It's the same type of thing you're talking about, Ian. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, just to give some context about the negative Nancys from Harvard and my very suspicious co-host, who sounds like one of them now. Interestingly enough, this organization from Harvard, surprise, surprise, is a particularly interesting group engaged in something called albedo modification, not to be confused with libido modification, but albedo.
I've been wanting to participate in libido modification for a very long time.
You have. Yeah, biblical times is what we talked about, right? So, which absolutely not in any way is chemtrails. Another wink, wink there. So, quote, we work on theoretical proposals for combating global warming called solar geoengineering or albedo modification. These are technologies that might enable people to add materials to the Earth's atmosphere to reflect a bit more sunlight back to space, partially masking or reducing the climate change, due to accumulated greenhouse gases. Isn't that basically admitting that what they're doing is a form of chemtrail?
Kind of right there.
Right.
It's the government would never do that, but we're doing it. Well,
they're Harvard. We have to trust what they say.
Oh God.
Yeah. They continued basically stating that it's in its early stages, and if it were ever tested, large quotes around that, at large scales, or implemented, it could involve physical risks and would raise a range of serious social, political, and ethical issues. We are confident that there is no currently active program to actively test or implement albedo modification outdoors. This is hilarious. We are not now involved in outdoor experimentation, though we are indeed actively developing proposals for field experiments. This experiment will proceed only if it is conducted in a fully transparent and public manner, and only if it passes a comprehensive independent safety review. The experimental plans, operations, and results will be publicly available and freely usable. No patenting. So they're basically saying we're doing it.
Says about that shit.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
That's a good take.
And it totally is. It's what I'm convinced of, guys. I'm absolutely convinced that there is a threshold. I don't know where it's at. There's a threshold of the cabal that you mentioned earlier. There's a point in which you become part of, and a point in which you fall below that line. And if you're below that line, you're expected to ingest this bullshit like it's lunch.
Well, it's the PPC. It's the pedophile party club. We're not in that. So they are in it, and they can keep all that information. What's his name? Schwab. Klaus Schwab can keep all that information to himself.
They're not hiding the ball anymore at all.
Well, I mean, it depends on what context.
Well, they might be hiding
about.
some kind of.
Yeah, it depends on what context. But yeah, I don't know. I think this is like from Harvard, basically them stating that chemtrails exist. And for our listeners, we're done. The podcast is done. We've determined it's finished. But yeah, that's just fascinating to me that they come out and say
Ian
that.
went to 100%. You went to 100%.
No, 80. I'm at 80.
Oh, no, you just went to 100.
Oh, well, now, I guess. Yeah, now I guess I'm 100.
I guess me too. So
cool. Wow, that's great. Yeah. So
So why is the reason bundled up in what these Harvard guys are saying?
Well, here's the thing.
Is this really a climate change issue? Is it that dang thing that's overwhelming the entire world, and everybody seems to be wanting to modify the climate? I mean, is that what's really going on here? Is that what these chemtrails are about?
Well, Ian, maybe you can answer this for me, because this is the question I would have for someone who is a little bit more than 80%. Is it a major, outside of unethical, is it a major issue if something like this is occurring for the betterment of humanity?
Yeah, but the betterment according to who?
Klaus Schwab. I mean, that's where I line is like, obviously I don't like that. I don't think that it's ethical. I think it's fucked up. Pardon my.
Well, what do you think, Ian?
Yeah. So are you basically saying like if there is, I mean, I don't know your guys' views on climate change or global warming or whatever they want to rebrand it as next. But are you basically saying?
I love that. That's
well, maybe we should clarify that real quick. And we're probably and again, I like the way you put it, Ian. There's a percentage that you got to put, and that's great, because then you keep it on a sliding scale. You're up a couple percent, you're down. And I think that climate change in general has been going on through the history of our Earth.
Yeah,
and the biggest climate changes throughout our history had zero to do with human beings. Zero. Mm-hmm. It has to do with the volcano.
Well, it has to do with the PPC, the pedophile party club, who was around
they have to
early.
Do with everything. They are the number one conspiracy. Right
Klaus has been around since 41.
But so there's, at least in my mind, there's no doubt that there are changes that occur. Yeah. The question really becomes: are we the thing that's putting it over the edge?
And are the things are they at a huge risk that they're saying like, oh, the world's going to come extinct in the next 10, 15 years?
Oh,
like,
no way.
Like that kind of stuff. That's where I kind of draw the line. I mean, everyone agrees. I think they finally got us here. I was kind of making a joke there. You spotted the rebranding. It's like it was once the Ice Age, and it's global warming in the 80s and 90s, or was it? And then
it's because Al Gore, he's no longer popular, so they had to rebrand.
Yeah, so they finally settled on the one that they've got us all with, because nobody can deny the climate change. It does.
Exactly.
It does. It's changed throughout time, and it'll continue to change. But whether the change is a threat to life, or whether the things that they're going to take away from us, because that's coming. Like what we've gone through in the last 2 years is like step one. Step two, I believe, is the climate lockdowns, like where in England they're already talking about a day where we don't drive our cars. And
same here.
It's an option just now, but then it becomes, right, guys, no longer you can drive your cars, and it becomes tyrannical. And what scares me about it is the government can be as tyrannical as they wish with climate change, because who are you to say that, oh, the world's going to end in 10 years, so you're the bad person if you don't comply, So I think they can use the climate change to be as tyrannical and openly tyrannical as they wish.
Yeah, I would align with that. The funny thing I found when I was doing this research on this is there was a lot of the people who stood with chemtrails don't exist kept using terms like unfalsifiable, which I would say the climate change argument is unfalsifiable.
Exactly.
And I would say I probably align, with Bull on this. Like it's climate has always changed, right? I mean, it's going to change until the end of time. There'll be a time when we all probably live on maybe 1 mile by 1 mile just plot of land in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It's going to be a never-ending tower into space, and everyone's going to live there. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be utopia. But whether that happens or not, I think the hyperbole associated with, well, the world is going to end in 10 years. I am AOC, and I have to come out and say and cry on top TV that if you don't listen to me, then you're evil and probably a racist. And yeah, it's all going to change, and you got to push forward this specific climate agenda that is very, very dense, and no one's ever read, and does not have any measurables at all outside of investment.
This goes back to what I was talking about a minute ago. There's this line of demarcation somewhere, don't know where it's at, but where there's this group, this cabal, this governmental agency or world governmental agency that sits atop this thing and has this view, this viewpoint that they simply know better than us. Mm-hmm. And maybe time will tell that they're right. I don't know, but I doubt it. But the thing is they're keeping our eyes closed as much as possible, or they're trying to close them.
Now, this is kind of a related question that in relation to that cabal, those people that organize all these things, the World Economic Forum, the Klaus Schwabs of the world, why now?
It's not just why now. There's always been people trying to have
I'm not saying
power,
that.
Right?
I mean, why is it
power.
so open now? Is that merely because of spread of information?
Hiding in plain sight, man. That's what this is. Yeah. I mean, the thing, everybody's learned over time that you can spin things in a million different directions. And if 50% of the population agrees with you, then you've got what you want, because there's always a debate going on, and you can march along with your agenda while everybody else is arguing it out on podcasts.
Hey, this is the way to do it, okay?
Well, I agree.
We are definitely not in any way contributing to what the climate change supporters would say is pollution by using all of our electrical products. The net value of our output right now is over 9,000 when it comes to Roadcaster and the lighting.
Yeah, I know. Exactly.
It's crazy. It's insane. But hey, at least we're powered by a Tesla power cord. It's great.
Exactly.
I wonder if it was. I'm sure you've heard this saying about they created the internet to control us, but then we turned the tables back, and now we know more than we should, and they don't like it. Basically, that like there's more and more people waking up, and I find that's the biggest. Probably asset that a conspiracy theorist, especially one with a podcast, has to do is provide hope to the listeners, because I, for one, have had to take time away from this stuff and maybe sit and watch Disney films at night instead of listening to this stuff, because it does take hold. It gets you down. It gets you, like, I've definitely, sunken in and been a bit more withdrawn, and and you do need to take a break from it. So
don't let it get to you like that, man. No. Like, you definitely need downtime. You need escapism. For sure.
So,
well, it could also be, and this is not me being facetious, even though it's going to sound like it. It could also be the chemtrails, because they do cause. There is evidence that they cause emotional distress. And by the way, I later in the notes, and this is journalistic integrity 101 from the Wolf and Bull. I think I may have found a corollary between chemtrails, the HAARP organization, or the HAARP program, and the Havana sickness. Mm-hmm. I stumbled across that last night, and I think there is some credibility here, which if I disappear and these are my last words,
we'll put it on your gravestone.
Yeah. He thought there was credibility
that's
here.
Right. Well, just as one thing to tie into what Ian was just saying, the information systems today are incredible. And if you think about history and how people in power controlled those that are not, especially when there's only a handful of people in power at any given time, whether it's the kings of a country or a council of some kind, or a parliament, or whatever you want to talk about. They used to control the rest of the people through dissemination of information, and lack of education, really. I mean, back in, a few hundred years ago, most people didn't know how to read or write. It's pretty easy to control people that don't know how to read or write.
Yeah.
So now information is out there and it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Anybody can get a hold of it. So now the way you control it is to spin the information in the direction you want it to go.
Which I wish they were better at doing, honestly.
It's very transparent that it happens.
It's just it's not that it's transparent. It's just so poorly done. It's like watching. So you brought up Disney a little bit ago.
Look,
when I was a kid,
you brought up Wolf's favorite subject.
I loved Disney when I was a kid. I grew up with Disney, and they had fantastic, cartoons that had some really questionable things in them as I grew older and noticed. But at the same time, as time has gone on, the creativity and the level of expression of certain views has gotten, as you said, more and more blatant, and also like more and more poorly executed. Like, look, if you're gonna try and trick me, just be good at it. Like I'll do. We'll jump into chemtrails in a second, but I'll use an anecdote that I think is a pretty good one. So I was in Barcelona a few years ago, and from the experience, because of a certain event, I don't particularly like that city. I like the people there. I think the city itself, separate from this event, is probably fantastic. The paella I had was great. Traveled to Andorra. It was a fun day, except that I got mugged in the morning. And the thing about getting mugged is that if you don't get beat up, then you don't really know you were mugged. So maybe I'm not using the best term here, but they saw that I had something that looked similar to a passport. They got it off my body without me knowing. And I was pissed off the rest of the day. And as time has gone on, I look back at that instance fondly, because they did a really good job of taking the phone off of me. I would have been
expert muggers.
Yeah. It didn't cause me any distress. I just went to my company and said, hey, this phone is stolen. They gave me a new phone. They couldn't have gotten into it.
How are you bringing that back around to Disney?
My whole point being that this pickpocket, this mugger, this group of individuals, they didn't cause me any distress outside of the general frustration of that moment. And as time has gone on, I've gotten over with it and I've reconciled. The PTSD is gone. I wish that was that way with Disney.
If it was truly gone, that story would not have come up.
No.
Put that behind you. Moved on. You'd have watched the next Disney film.
We forgive, but we never forget. Okay, so that's the whole point here. Is that's what I'm making.
And by the way, just as a side note to what we're talking about, we're going side. But Ian, you mentioned that you have to give yourself a break from this, because if you go down the rabbit hole too far, you're like, where's land again, right? Mm-hmm. You're underground the whole time, and I can see that point of view, because it can be overwhelming, inundating. Mm-hmm. But I think what we need to hold on to, especially as people that are trying to broadcast our viewpoints out there, is we're doing something that is intentional and positive, no matter what side of a particular conspiracy theory your viewpoint comes from or goes to.
Yeah.
This is a good we're doing. Mm-hmm. And so I try to hang my hat on that. When I get down and talk about, I get into a lot of business discussions in some other things that I do, and it can be quite frankly depressing, because what you see, and you mentioned it earlier, Ian, there's so much corruption out there. It's almost everywhere you turn. You can throw something in the air, and if it hits someone, they're just likely to be corrupt as they are not to be. And I hate to be jaded that way, but that's been my experience through business life. But if I dwell on that too much, it becomes overwhelming. So what I do is I talk about it in this format or others, and I feel like that is that's catharsis.
Yeah.
That's my way of getting that information out and in some way, shape, or form helping others.
Yeah, well, what you're not telling the listeners is that you also have a heavy dependency upon methamphetamines every Tuesday. So
I told you not to mention that again.
We're here at the Wolf and Bull. We're all about transparency.
This is actually a chem lab.
Yeah.
Not a chemtrail. It's a chem lab.
Well, it's funny enough, just visually, the bull kind of looks a little bit like Walter White. So
that's true. That is
give
true.
him a little bit of a hat. Give him a hat. The look is complete. But yeah, let's dive back into chemtrails. Let's go back to the fun explanation. The explanation that I think probably has more truth than people think it does.
Ian, did you get your point of view out? Because you started to say something about climate change, and then we went off on a tangent, and I don't want to.
No, do you know what it was? It's actually a concept that it's just been put on me in the last month or so by someone that I do podcasting with, and I think the question you were about to ask was, or forgive me if I'm wrong, but are you saying that if the people that are in the know that the world is at risk of extinction or whatever, and the risks are real, that if they are taking the decisions to maybe depopulate the world, is that a good? That sounds crazy to say that, but is that the kind of it's kind of, if that the world's going to end unless we get the population down, and then you're going to fund things like chemtrails and GMOs and all these other depopulating tools, are you actually wrong because you're doing a greater good? I think that's that phrase has been chosen wisely. That greater good that we keep hearing. It's a thought that I don't like to think about for too long because it's not in my blood at all. Like, it's basically evil, but you can kind of see that I think a lot of people talked about Hitler maybe having that methodology, like it's an evil that they're doing, but it's for the greater good. And the quotes from David Keith even summed that up. You mentioned him earlier, and he's been blatant enough to say things like, this may negatively impact some people, but it's a risk we have to take. Yeah. And it may rain more around the world, but that's a tiny addition to what's already happening. And then Richard Branson, if we manage to fix this, it means we can still use our planes and cars. So
that's
you can see the mindset behind these guys. Like, they are the ones in the know. I'm not saying
the problem with that mindset, though, Ian, is that they believe they're right.
Yeah.
And they believe they're right based on whatever they've decided is right. This collective good thing is interesting, and we all have our points of view on what's better and what's not better, for sure. Mm-hmm. But having someone else make that decision for me is antithetical to being a human being, in my opinion.
Well, I guess, and here's the thing, like, I would probably align in the sense that, obviously, I just for transparency, I think the depop argument is, there's a lot of gray there. And I think that from a rational point of view, when it comes to the side of depopulation, I would say it's probably already happening. I mean, we could say that with, the recent change in legality in the United States about a certain thing that has been going on since the 60s. And that is definitely a form of depopulation. You could probably say that about,
what is every war that's ever occurred, right?
So I'm not to say that it's not happening. I guess my, positing the question of, what if there's a greater good coming from chemtrails? I would probably add on, if the only thing that happens is an adjustment within climate change, and the positive is a net positive as opposed to a net negative, ethically, yes, it's unethical. I would probably say that and probably wouldn't be okay with it. But at the same time, if people aren't dying and if things like that don't happen, because I would say that people have a habit of jumping both sides of the ship, right? They're going to jump off the far right and say, this is obviously happening and people are going to die 100%. And in 20 years, things are going to be crazy and we're all going to be in wars and all that. And that's could be true. And then the left hand, they got people saying, well, if we don't do this, we're all going to die and people are going to be in wars. We're all going to be fighting over water, like in Waterworld, and Mel Gibson's going to be leading the charge. And
it's the same about both those arguments?
They're kind of
we're all going to die eventually.
Yeah. That's so my observation is, if it's in the gray area of we do something, like, for example, when it comes to electricity, right? Net positive there, in my opinion. The advancements of electricity as opposed to utilizing fire and candles are pretty extreme and pretty positive. So if it's like that, which I don't know if it is, but if it's like that, then I would kind of be like, oh, okay, well, all right. Not in the sense of like, and I'm not saying if people die and it becomes that way, it's okay. If people die, it's terrible. So I guess it's like my position is kind of like my toes in the water, but it's not, my foot's not all the way in. My body's not all the way in. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. Well, I mean, people will, come up to a body of water and they'll jump in no matter what temperature it is, because they're that kind of risk profile type of person. And there's other people that have to test everything out.
Yeah.
Now, and we've talked about this many, many times. And Ian, I use the word incrementalist all the time, because from my point of view, things should be thought through, strategically move forward, come to consensus on doing things, and not done in the dark. I think they should be transparent, for good or for bad. It might be the best thing in the world to these chemtrails. Let's say they're blocking sun rays, like a lot of people believe, and they're reflecting some of this off, and it's going to moderate our overall planetary temperature to something that's better for the human race for the next 1,000 years. I have no idea, and nobody will know for 1,000 years for sure. But let's say that's the truth. Okay, then come out and say it, man. Mm-hmm. Just don't just hide it from everybody, because all you're doing is my disbelief in what my government and your government and everybody's government says about things comes from the fact that people hide. If they don't hide this stuff, if they're transparent about it, then I start believing people more.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. At the end of the day, I think it's definitely an interesting position to have. But let's go ahead and jump right back into the fun explanation of chemtrails. Now we'll probably revisit the alternate position soon because I want to flesh that out just a little bit more. But when it comes to chemtrails in depth, from the conspiracy side of things, it's the belief that long-lasting condensation trails or chemtrails consisting of chemicals and biological agents left in the sky by high-flying aircraft sprayed for nefarious purposes undisclosed to the general public. Now, brief history, chemtrail conspiracy theories began to circulate after the United States Air Force published a 1996 report about weather modification titled Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025. Following the report, in the late 1990s, the USAF was accused of spraying the U.S. population with mysterious substances from aircraft, generating unusual contrail patterns. I think that's pretty interesting. I've always speculated, much like you, Ian, why are those contrails in the sky? They definitely something that people notice, and I've noticed in my life. And probably a little bit more, as we were discussing a little bit ago, than, maybe the Bulls generation or people prior, just because of the advancements in technology. And if this is something that was going on with the USAF, then that obviously would be a direct corollary as well. Now, in 2000, multiple agencies, including the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, NASA, and the NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, provided a multi-agency response to quell the rumors of chemtrails. The USAF claimed in 2005 that the paper does not reflect current military policy, practice, or compatibility. What do you make of that, Ian?
It's hard. I don't know, really. See, when a company comes out and claims it's not true, I just think, well, move on. Like, it's not something that I would take for fact. I know that sounds to maybe the skeptic, we should be trusting these organizations, but they've lied and lied so many times in the past. Why should we? I don't really have much to add on that.
Yeah.
I do know that there's more examples of them coming out and admitting it. And I always use, like I told you guys at the start of the show, I like the cult, the Freemasons, the secret society type things. And these are karmic societies that I believe that at the very top of these organizations, and the cabal and the the PSS?
The PPC.
Yeah. These are members of these cults, and they believe in karma. So they do tell us in their own way, whether it's through symbology or, they do tell us that they are doing these things. So things like that, maybe at that time, maybe they weren't doing it in the way that the conspiracy theorists believed, but it's a I just move on from that.
Yeah. Well, and just for our listeners, the whole idea was really popularized specifically in 2004. The idea of chemtrails, with a publication from William Thomas called Chemtrails Confirmed. He basically suggested that normal contrails dissipate, as we discussed a little bit ago, relatively quickly, whereas contrails that linger may have added substances. And subscribers to this theory, they speculate that chemical release may be solar radiation management, which, that's kind of sounds like, what was it? Libido modification? Was that what it was? Which basically, as just from a brief overview, SRM can offset some human-induced warming by reflecting solar energy back into space before that energy becomes long-wave infrared radiation that can be captured by greenhouse gases, which, that's real salesy.
For all of time, people have tried to control their environment, their weather, for all of human history.
Yeah.
We settle in places where there are rivers. We
pray for rain. We sacrifice
bodies. We pray for rain. We
bodies.
dance for rain. We sacrifice people. You name it. We've done it over the course of time. And this is, in some kind of ways, an extension of that. If we look at it in that viewfinder.
Yeah. Well, chemtrails also. Go ahead.
Sorry, can I jump back in there and try and make a better argument for why I don't believe this? See where it says the USAF claimed in 2005 that the paper does not reflect current military policy.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
See that's how I think, right?
Yep.
So if you read these phrases, these statements that get put out even today, read them and read them for what they actually say. Look into the words. I've got the etymology app on my phone. So things like the Delta variant and the Lambda, look into those words. So when it says there does not reflect current, well, I'm just thinking, well, okay, that's current, but what have you got planned for next week, And just
very
to kind of,
precise words they use on purpose, right?
Well, they skipped one when it came to Delta, Lambda, all those
They
variants.
skipped the one that sounded like a Chinese word.
Well, hey, whoa.
That's exactly what they did.
Let's be careful here, okay?
Be careful. Why? Is the PPC going to be living in?
The
or
Party
is it
Pedophile Club,
in?
the Children Castration Party.
They did have a one-child policy.
This will probably be a good time to add in. I've got the 50 US Code 1520A is a code saying that restrictions on the use of human subjects for testing of chemical or biological agents. And it says A, prohibited activities the Secretary of Defense may not conduct directly or by contract. And then any test or experiment involving in the use of chemical agent or biological agent on a civilian population, or 2, any other testing of a chemical agent or biological agent on human subjects. So if it was left at that, you could argue that, see, that's it, chemtrails are debunked. But then it goes on to say B, exceptions subject to subsection C, D, and E. The prohibition in subsection A does not apply to a test or experiment carried out for any of the following purposes. Number one,
of course,
any peaceful protest that has related to a medical, therapeutic, pharmaceutical, agricultural, industrial, or research activity. That's the part that in the documentary I watched.
Holy
they can't spray you unless it's for research. Then they can spray you.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, just kidding.
Emergency authorization.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
You should have saw our faces a second ago. Our jaws were on the floor.
That's awesome research, man. That is, and you're right. It's right in the code there. People just have to read it. It's like bills that are introduced in Congress, etc. Here's a 500,000 page bill. Please read it by tomorrow so we can vote on it. I mean, there's always
Spark Notes 5,000 page.
Exactly. But that's a really good point you have, Ian, because there's always exceptions, right?
Yeah, we have. This has been quite a hot topic over the last couple of years as well, where people are doing a lot of research in the UK on common law Magna Carta, and in regards to like the law and courtrooms and the language that they use. And I love this topic. I've got an episode on it where an example is the word understand. When you get stopped by the police and they're consistently saying, "Do you understand? Do you understand?" To them, they use the Black's Law Dictionary, whereas you guys use the Merriam-Webster. We use the John Collins. Understand to us means, yes, I understand, I comprehend. But in the Black's Law Dictionary, understand means I stand under you. I give you the power over me. So this is what I mean. When organizations and presidents and groups put out statements, read the wording, because it's very telling,
Well, I think we did an episode a few, like 10, 15 episodes ago about etymology changes.
Yeah.
Which, so I can totally see that being reasonable. It's always funny that, and I think that's the main issue on a side note, at least maybe it's worldwide, but from my perspective in the United States, what we're really dealing with is as you said, the problems with dissemination of information, and then two sides that are arguing the same thing under different understandings of what that thing means to them.
Well, interestingly, what Ian's talking about here is the legal context around all of these subjects. Oh, yeah. Because that's the way these are built, right? The politicians they all have a million lawyers putting this stuff together. Anybody that's ever read a contract to do anything knows how difficult those contracts can be to parse your way through and determine really which side of the sentence you need to fall on.
Yeah.
So that's a very, very good point. And if they're using a certain etymology for defining understand as opposed to anything else, I mean, it makes a huge difference on the rear view mirror side of things when it comes to deciding the legality of what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, we know in the United States that things have happened. What was the MK
Ultra,
and some other things that have happened over the course of history.
Definitely
that
JFK.
Everybody believed at the time because their honest, ethical government told them that none of that stuff really happened, and now we know it all happened.
Yeah.
So why should we believe any of this stuff?
Right? Well, and that's kind of
from them.
Yeah, and that's kind of the struggle that I have internally, and I think a lot of people do, especially people that maybe opt out of these discussions. And as we discussed a little bit ago, taking a break, because there seems to be this very wide gap between people who look at the government and believe everything they say wholeheartedly, and then people who look at almost everything and say, well, that didn't happen. And I think the answer, from my perspective, is probably somewhere in the mix, probably somewhere in the middle. Now, granted, as time goes on, I'm probably going to start moving towards the direction of none of that happened, because the government keeps doing douchebag things for douchebag reasons. But again, I think chemtrails specifically on the note of their effect in society and the environment, I definitely do think there's most likely something occurring. And I know we mentioned solar SRM, solar radiation management, and weather modification. Maybe to some degree psychological manipulation and human population control. I think the likely case personally is probably biological and chemical warfare testing, frankly. Now, some of the chemicals that, chemtrails conspiracy theorists claim to be involved in chemtrails include barium, aluminum salts, polymer fibers, thorium, silicon carbide, all of which are not very good for you. And obviously, this would lead to the trails causing respiratory illnesses and other health problems. And obviously, then we could also go into clouds being seeded with electrically conductive materials as part of a massive electromagnetic super weapons program based around the high-frequency active auroral research program, HAARP, which we'll touch on in just a few moments. The interesting thing, and we talked about this in our previous episode, Ian, is the death of the mainstream media. Mainstream media does not pay attention to any of this information. They dismiss it outright. And in 2013, for example, when it was made public that the National Academy of Sciences were to receive funds from the CIA, NASA, and NOAA to conduct research into methods to counteract global warming or climate change, with geoengineering, the International Business Times claimed the idea of any government agency looking at ways to control, manipulate the weather will be met with scrutiny and fears of malign conspiracies, which it doesn't have to be malign to be a conspiracy. So
exactly. Yeah. So, Ian, of this kind of list or something additional, where do you, in your research, where do you think this chemtrail? Because I think we're all in agreement that the chemtrail thing is happening to some degree and for unknown reasons. Where does your research put you in on this?
Well, like an overall summary of what this is.
Yeah, my bias is that this is kind of weather related and blocking sun rays and things like that. And I suspect that's not yours. So I just wanted to get, kind of where you're thinking.
I think it's a bit of them all. I think they do different types. The grid pattern, well, first and foremost, I've got here, there's 12 new clouds that they're teaching to kids in school. So for me, that tells me there's 12 different types of ways of doing chemtrails or cloud seeding. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was different reasons why, like causalities, like what happens when you do a certain type of chemtrail. But obviously with the dementia and the Alzheimer's, that's a huge moment, red pill moment, if you will, where I've got written here that in 2016, dementia and Alzheimer's was the leading cause of death in the UK. And it's in other countries, it was in I think it was third in Australia. Forgive me if I'm wrong. But
that one actually jumped out at me too, Ian, because when Wolf was talking about the aluminum salts in particular, mm-hmm. and that there's some associative things with dementia and Alzheimer's with aluminum mm-hmm. in the brains of people that they've dissected after that dissected
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a dicey. You know what I meant.
Yeah.
So,
But I mean, because I mean, obviously I believe in climate change because we've already established that we all do because the climate is changing. But if they're going to come out and tell us, which they have done, this is why it's no longer a conspiracy theory. They're coming out and saying that we are spraying aerosol into the stratosphere, the ionosphere, which is aluminum and barium. And I'll just add, because I love to do this, that the conspiracy theorists like to show that the two-lettered symbol for barium is BA and the two-lettered symbol for aluminum is AL. So it's Baal, which is the demon, and then you've got sulfur.
Hell yeah.
Exactly. Hell.
And then you've got the other main thing that they spray is sulfur, which is associated with the devil's presence. And I know that's just, for some people might not understand, but I do see a strong religious, way the world is. Like the people that run our world, the real people that run our world are heavily religious. They do believe in Lucifer and God and all that. Right. So when they're doing things like that, using barium and aluminium, it's like, it's symbolic. It's not, I mean,
well,
there's no proof there.
If you add up the periodic table numbers for all those, it comes to 666.
Wow.
I
like that. I like that. Is it not? Okay. You got me, see? But anyway, so they're coming out and tell us that they are spraying a layer of aluminium to act like a mirror and to make the sun bounce back and like all in the good for climate change or global warming. I don't believe that. So I'm going to say it's obviously for another reason, which I believe that those particles are then coming down. We're ingesting them. They're landing in our crops. They're landing in our food, water supply. And then you're having all these illnesses, Alzheimer's, fatigue, sadness, anger. Like there's all these behavioral and diseases that we're.
I would add to that the autism spectrum.
Yeah.
I have someone very close to me that has that, and he was born in 95, right? Yeah, in 95. I should.
Why are you asking me?
I should know that. I'm going.
I thought you were going to say me. I was like, this is really mean.
Bulls have so many children that you got to figure out. Any event, and there's certainly been scientific research that has broadened the spectrum over the course of time, but there's a lot of evidence that a large part of, depending on which part of the spectrum you're on, is autism is environmental. Mm-hmm. And here we go talking about this very kind of thing where whether it's GMOs, whether it's things in the water supply, whether it's the drugs that are ubiquitous going down the drain and out into the rivers and affecting, populations. We could talk about all those, but here's one of them that jumps right out at us today on this podcast, and that's chemtrails.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
have you guys covered Agent Orange? I know you mentioned it earlier, and that's a whole podcast in itself.
No,
that would be a
good
fun conversation.
Yeah.
Well,
because I have a list here of tons of government operations dating back from 1923, where the U.S. Air Service created a smokescreen. You might have seen that footage because I've seen it plenty. It's just like a plane goes along and drops smoke, and it goes all the way down to the water and creates like a curtain. Mm-hmm. And it was, and they admitted this. So this was 1923, and since then you've had Project Cyrus, Project Cumulus, a.k.a. Operation Witch Doctor, Project Skyfire, Project Skywater. Then you've had Agent Orange. So there are these operations that have seemingly became public knowledge now through the Freedom of Information Act. So this is why when you asked me earlier about government organizations coming out and saying that this isn't happening, it's like, well, you've admitted it and you've used that technology and you've told us about it, so you can't go back and say it's not happening anymore.
Yeah, there's a lot of double speak that I've noticed that goes on when it comes to the government specifically. And I've got personal friends that have some levels of clearance that I'll keep very close to me and not mention in detail. But I understand that there is definitely a lot going on that most people don't know of and likely never will know of. I'm sure you're probably familiar with skunk work operations and the creation of, aircraft that has the ability to disappear on radar. Well, that was going on in the 60s and 70s, and we're well past that time. So I have to imagine that some of these, experiments and chemical I guess abuses would probably be a good word, have continued and will continue into the future. And they're definitely they're fun to talk about and fun to learn about, but also incredibly concerning.
Yeah. I would say so.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And here's the thing is I wouldn't say that all of them, I mean, because when it comes to like warfare and stuff like that, obviously we need to have to some level of degree, a upper hand against what we would perceive to be enemies. But with that being said, it's just interesting, as you were saying a little bit ago, Bo, they choose to keep this stuff, especially on the chemical side of things and maybe even the policy side of things, or definitely on the policy side of things, very close to the chest.
Well, they don't want the perception to go the wrong way either. And
how would it go any other way, though?
Think about it. It's very easy if you use doublespeak, and if you have the lawyers writing up everything so that they're using the correct verbiage on all of this stuff. They're saying one thing and they're really meaning another. That's what we're all agreeing on here.
Yeah.
And then they can take people like us that are talking about a quote unquote conspiracy, whether it's a theory or whether it's evidentiary. They can point at us and say, they're just fringe. Right. Well, and, that's what they want to do.
Yeah, well, they can do that. But I mean, there's definitely been some pop culture references to chemtrail, but there's also been some legal and government references that have, as we said a second ago, referred to that doublespeak aspect. One of them occurred in 2001 in response to a request from constituents, U.S. Congressman Dennis, I want to say it's Kucinich, Dennis Kucinich, introduced but did not author H.R. 2977 107th, the Space Preservation Act of 2001, that would have permanently prohibited the basing of weapons in space, listing chemicals as one of the number of exotic weapons that would be banned. Proponents have interpreted this explicit reference to chemtrails as official government acknowledgement of their existence. And I believe I said chemicals, listing chemtrails as one of the number of exotic weapons. Skeptics note that the bill in question also mentions extraterrestrial weapons and environmental, climate, or tectonic weapons. The bill went nowhere and died on committee, but that doesn't mean that those things do not exist.
Just the fact they mentioned them tells you they exist.
Exactly. And, I think this would probably be a good time to jump into HAARP, because I think that's a really good indicator of a very kind of doublespeak, tongue-in-cheek type of situation where the government's like, well, this thing exists, but it doesn't really exist. And I think that would give our listeners a really good view of at least the detail of what chemtrails.
I think you're right. We should jump into that, but I just wanted to mention that one of the ways to look at research on a lot of these subjects we're talking about is the patent offices. At least in the United States, we can look at that, because there are so many conspiracies around the billionaires involved with different aspects of these things.
You don't say.
Exactly.
The 15 billionaires that own all the major media.
Everything.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Their GDP is individually is greater than most countries, right? But there are and always have been things to try to moderate or affect weather one way or another. There are things where they use sonic cannons to try to mitigate hail out there. And there are, and you can look at the patent office and find the patents on these kind of things. I've actually got patent numbers down here, but I won't get into that. But there are, as far as chemtrails are concerned, there are actually experiments done. These are usually the small planes that have been identified that have technology that uses silvered iodide to throw into the clouds to make it rain, right? Mm-hmm. And even Bill Gates has been in on this, talking about trying to moderate hurricane, category, to lower the categories by helping ships bring up cooler water from the ocean floor to moderate the temperature of the surface water, thus breaking up there's all kinds of stuff out there that show these things are happening all the time.
But don't believe your lying eyes. Don't believe your lying eyes.
So why would we not believe this is happening?
Yeah. And just go back to watching Cuties.
Oh God! Oh my God! That's part of the, what was it, PCC?
Again, the right? PPC guys is the pedophile party club. Okay, but yeah, so you make a good point there, and I think it's so funny, at least from an observational perspective. And this is probably where I'm fundamentally incorrect, because we had this long discussion about this, Bull and I, on
as you always say, we're 100% right 60% of the time,
all the time. Yeah. So I mean, I tend to align with the fact that people do things for advantageous reasons, not necessarily for the purpose of like some deification aspect of things. But again, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that I'm probably incorrect on that. Or maybe it's a mix of both. But with that being said, I do think that your points on bringing up the patents and the very openly available moves that the government has made available to the public as being incredibly credible to particularly chemtrails and some other operations.
Well, hell, they're talking about UAFs now, like openly.
Yeah.
Like stuff that when I was a kid was in comic magazines, and everybody thought you were an idiot for even talking about an alien.
I'm still going back to simulation theory.
Remember, there was a time that I recall very well when people truly believed there probably was no other planets out there. I mean, they really believe that.
Yeah. So, man, how was it in 4 AD?
I was going to say that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
You
remember the wheel?
Hey, who do you think invented fire? Come on now.
God. But yeah, so just I don't know. It's interesting food for thought. It's also, stuff that'll keep you up late at night. And HAARP, I think, is one of those things that also will keep you up late at night. Now, I don't know how familiar
with a migraine
or more than that. I don't know how familiar either of you are with the high frequency active auroral research program. But this is something I came across while researching climate change that people say ties into the mind control, psychological manipulation aspect of chemtrails. Why did I say climate change? Of chemtrails. Not talking about climate change, but maybe it probably affects both. So the high frequency active auroral research program, referred to as HAARP, was initiated as an ionospheric research program jointly funded by the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Navy, and the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, referred to as DARPA. Designed and built by BAE Advanced Technologies, a British arms security and aerospace company located in London, which is also, surprise, surprise, the largest defense contractor in Europe. The original purpose of HAARP was to analyze the ionosphere and investigate the potential for developing ionospheric enhancement technology for radio communications and surveillance. Basically, it can heat the ionosphere to a very high degree so they can research it and see how it affects radio waves.
That sounds very safe, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Since 2015, it has been operated by the University of Alaska Fairbanks, but work on HAARP began in 1993. It was operational by 1999 and fully completed in 2007 by BAE. The most prominent instrument at HAARP is the Ionospheric Research Instrument, the IRI, a high-power radio frequency transmitter facility operating in the high-frequency AHF band. The IRI is used to temporarily excite a limited area of the ionosphere. Other instruments, such as the VHF and the UHF radar, a fluxgate magnometer, sounds like something out of Back to the Future, a digisonde, which is an ionospheric sounding device, and an induction magnometer are used to study the physical processes that occur in the excited region. As of 2008, HAARP has incurred around $250 million in tax-funded construction and operating costs that in 2015 they just gave to the University of Alaska Fairbanks, because that's what the CIA does. They invest things, they investigate things, they create things that are wildly expensive with taxpayer dollars, and then they just give it to colleges and never use it again, quote unquote.
Things that make you go,
Yeah, I find that to be incredibly interesting because here's the thing, and I'm going to tie this to something called Havana sickness, and I'm sure both of you heard about this years ago, but you probably talked about it in detail as well. But it's something that was unexplained and still kind of sort of unexplained. But then in February of this year, they were like, oh yeah, well, we thought it was magnetic waves, and now, or microwaves. Now we realize that it's actually radio waves. And HAARP has the ability to project, I would argue, the effects of their technology hundreds of miles, if not thousands of miles. So I don't know, just some food for thought there, because I think that actually plays a big part in mind control. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I wonder if that plays into the voice to mind technology. I don't know if you've heard of that. I did a show on Isaac Kappy, and he said he was complaining about he could hear voices and they were being put into his mind in some way. I don't know if that's the only reference I've heard of it, but
there is so many strange technologies out there that someone is diving into that have to do with the linkage between current technologies and biologics, whether we're talking nanotechnology, whether we're talking different kind of waves that are already occurring within our brains, or how we can affect those waves from the outside. And HAARP, it's interesting that they talk about this exciting the ionosphere in a certain way and using it to create this kind of platform to bounce radio waves off and do some interesting things that a government would want to do, and as far as weaponizing it or communications, et cetera. All that's a great idea, but there's always something underneath it.
Well, the damn thing can create an artificial aurora borealis. Well, I mean, it can create it can literally. I mean, come on, exactly. That's magic.
That is magic. Well, I mean, everything ends up having a different ability, right? Even you look at medicines, and I don't know why this popped in my brain. You guys can decide why this might have popped in my brain, but there was a particular drug that was studied years and years and years ago. It was going to be a heart medicine.
Oh yeah.
And lo and behold, every time somebody popped one of those pills, something happened down in another region that was not exciting the ionosphere, but something else. And so
chronic diarrhea.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about anyway, you know what I'm talking about out there.
Yeah.
So my point is things start off in one direction and they lead to another.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just think it's funny. I mean, especially from the media aspect of things, because HAARP, it's kind of died down over the years. I mean, people outside of this recent article from, I think it was the New York Times that talked about Havana.
Have you seen the pictures of that though?
It looks insane.
It does.
It looks like a Orwellian radio factory is what it looks like. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to like mainstream media, of course, they take the most stupid position on things. They had an article, NPR specifically had an article that came out when the CIA was thinking about permanently closing down HAARP, quote unquote, titled "Bye Bye to the Home of a Favorite Internet Conspiracy Theory." That's not condescending at all. And basically they talked about how, the effects of HAARP and how it's so powerful and how it's like a radio station, and how it can create an artificial aurora borealis. And they also said that the research has the potential to improve satellite communications and navigation. Sure it does. And that the military has used it to study things that they don't talk about, which just kind of letting the cat out of the bag there. Literally, and I quote, they said, "On occasion, there have been secret experiments." You can't make this shit up. Many of these involve communication with nuclear submarines. HAARP can turn the ionosphere into a giant antenna that can be used to transmit signals.
Somebody
underwater.
told me the other day that there's a bunch of missing submarines. You guys either heard of that? Either of you?
Yeah.
Ian, how about you? Have you heard of that?
No.
Yeah, 18 of them I heard were just they're
missing.
gone. They're missing. Yeah. How does that happen?
They've got some interns.
They're all sitting military. Up at Fairbanks, Alaska.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the conspiracy behind HAARP, and I touched on this, but it specifically is about weaponizing weather. People believe that it can actually trigger earthquakes and even control minds, manipulating our minds through an extremely low frequency of signals, affecting how we think and feel, creating stress, confusion, psychosis, and the inability to not dance TikTok dances. It's wild. Commentators and scientists say that advocates of this theory are uninformed because, of course, they're not experts, as claims made fall well outside the abilities of the facility and not in the scope of natural science. Didn't they say that about a specific medicine released in 2020? Didn't they say that? Not in the realms of science, something along those lines. So what I thought is probably a direct corollary, and I'm speculating here, and I probably could be in trouble with this, but I think HAARP may have played a part, quote unquote, in the Havana syndrome incident of alleged officials developing a set of medical symptoms with unknown causes experienced mostly abroad by U.S. government officials and military personnel in, I think it was 2016. I think it played a part in that.
Well, there's something going on there.
100%.
There's absolutely something going on there. And that's happened in several other places in the world. This was originally found in Havana on U.S. It was the U.S. consulate, right? The embassy, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it was just headaches or if maybe it even ties to what Ewan's talking about. These people were starting to hear voices. Who knows what was really going on there? But what a perfect place to experiment, right?
Yeah.
Havana?
Why not? Yeah, and you can't really, the officials can't really hold you accountable because you're their boss. I mean, HR departments and the government. Yeah. Sure, they don't do that. So basically what happened behind that is symptoms were experienced in China, New Delhi, India, Europe, and Washington, D.C. The cause and validity of the illness have yet to be determined, even though it kind of trickled into the microwave weaponry type area. Basically, a group of experts found that not all injuries to the diplomats and CIA officers could be explained by stress or psychosomatic reactions. Intelligence officials briefed on the panel findings did not say how many cases it had focused on, though they said 10 to 20 victims were interviewed. They said the panel focused on cases which victims heard a strange sound or felt pressure and then experienced a loss of balance and ear pain. In addition, the panel focused on cases in which the victims reported the sounds as coming from a specific direction. Now, I don't want to imply that it was, specifically with all verifiable information HAARP, but it kind of sounds like something HAARP could do.
From quite a distance.
Quite
from
a
Alaska?
Distance. Well, here's the thing, is the company that created HAARP is a defense company that manufactures weaponry. Would it be totally implausible to think that maybe they took that same technology and made a weapon out of it? Maybe. Is that implausible? Maybe. Maybe it is.
You're onto something there.
Maybe. Now, I thought this was all total nonsense. But it's doesn't turn out to be, because in February of 2022 this year, as I mentioned, the New York Times published an article in which they claim the panel now believes it is the cases were specifically related to radio energy, which is what HAARP emits. So
you would think it would be localized. So maybe what they did is they kind of developed what they wanted to through this HAARP system, and they turned it in. I mean, there are weapons out there we have no idea. There's sonic weapons for sure. You can read about those today.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of laser weapons. Certainly the chemtrails can be weaponized. Think about that. I mean, we can talk about climate change and all this other stuff that or changing the weather in the ionosphere with chemtrails, et cetera. But I mean, dropping shit on people, chemicals on people, things that change their disposition or their psychology.
No one's ever done that. We've never ever dropped anything on anyone ever.
As soon as we got in the freaking plane, as soon as Auroral and Wilbur were in flight, they were dropping shit.
Yeah.
So
that's just interesting.
This is what I mean by it sounds an awful lot like CERN. Yeah, I'm sure you guys have heard of CERN.
Oh yeah.
Who openly talk about smashing atoms together to create a new Big Bang, and HAARP sounds pretty similar. And it's like, where's the line? Like, men playing God doing things like this, which could have devastating effects for us, and probably does. Like, even if it's the chemtrail thing, it's playing God with the weather, playing God with spraying the skies, and what effects that has. Where's the line on, should we just sit back and not explore our technologies, or, because that's what we're put here to do. It's like, technology is a great thing. We've learned so much, but these people that are in charge seem to have no boundaries. Like, they just go and go.
Yeah,
and
I agree with you.
What happens? Yeah,
the governments have proven, humans have proven that there is no line they won't cross. I mean, if you read a little bit about the Manhattan Project and the stuff that was going on at the time the atom bomb was being put together, the first time they decided to try that out, there was true, very deliberate discussion about whether that was going to cause a chain reaction and destroy half the frickin' planet.
Well,
and they said, let's try it anyway.
Yeah. Well, and reading about this stuff really puts me in that position of like wanting things like the Large Hadron Collider to, malfunction and create a black hole, so we don't have to deal with this anymore.
That's been Ian's talking about CERN, and that's been a concern for the entire time that thing's been put in position. Think about the amount of money put together to have that. I don't even remember how many miles it is around that circle in CERN, but it's a huge
27 kilometers.
It's a huge collider to what? Discover a new element. And I'm a science guy. I love this stuff. I love the idea of exploring our technology. But I think there's boundaries. I don't know what those boundaries are. and we push them all the time. And I guess the argument is that if we don't do them, if we don't do them here, somebody will do them.
So
but
if
again,
we don't
it's doing
kill
them in the dark is the problem I have.
If we don't accidentally kill humanity, China, Russia, or someone else would do it. I mean,
apparently climate change will kill us all before any of that. So we might as well experiment with all this.
Well, I think we should probably end on a little bit of a lighter note.
Because
I am one raspberry sour in.
I'm going to do after this is I'm going to go watch a Disney film.
I'm going to go cry. Oh man, you wake up in the morning and all of a sudden all the fabric and particles around you start being manipulated because CERN went wrong. Oh, what a Monday. But yeah, so I think we should end on the birds aren't real conspiracy, because I think that this gives maybe a healthy comedic aspect to this when it comes to conspiracies.
Well, there you go, laughing about it again.
I just that I think it's if it is real, it's hilarious. Okay. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, and I wasn't until I became very involved with the deep memeology of the internet. So the birds aren't real conspiracy is a satirical conspiracy theory which posits that birds are actually drones operated by the United States government to spy on American citizens.
I guess I should stop shooting those birds in my backyard.
I want it to be real so bad.
Well, have you ever looked at the drones?
Pigeons?
They can come out? Yeah, pigeons, the rats of the sky. Not pigeons. Those are doves. I don't know. One of those two.
Anyway. Same. Doves are not the rats of the sky. It's
one
pigeons.
of them are. No, in like big cities.
Pigeons.
Is it pigeons?
Yeah, doves are like the angelic, like, and he appeared and doves flew. Now he's a miracle.
Pigeons.
He's doing miracles. Yeah, but obviously, I would say this one is obviously a joke. The guy who came up with it, Peter Mickendoe, he created the conspiracy theory on a whim in January of 2017. He saw pro-Trump counter-protesters at 2017 in a women's march in Memphis, Tennessee, and he wrote "Birds aren't real" on a poster and improvised a conspiracy theory amongst the counter-protesters as a spontaneous joke. A video of McIndoe at the march went viral, and that birthed the satirical movement. This movement claims that all birds in the United States were exterminated by the federal government between 1959 and 1971 and replaced by look-alike drones used by the government to spy on citizens. I just think that is chef's kiss.
It's obvious.
I think it's great.
It's yeah. I mean, all these endangered species birds that are coming back so heavy. How do you think they got there? They're cyborg birds.
These birds would sit on power lines to recharge themselves. They'll poop on cars as tracking methods. And the U.S. President John F. Kennedy was assassinated by the government due to his reluctance to kill the birds. So I think I just think it's funny. It provides levity to the very gravity breaking aspect of chemtrails and HAARP and all that jazz.
That is a fun subject, and I could see how you could tail off in a million directions on those. And the unfortunate part is that's going to get more traction as years go by, because you can look up different drones that are creating.
Someone's going to do it.
You got drones the size of little bees and shit now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing the technology we come up. And I want to qualify something. I'm amazed at what human beings are actually capable of. And I'm at the same time dismayed at what human beings are actually capable of. Yeah. That's the problem with what we have today. And I go back to something I said an hour ago. Transparency, man. Just tell us what the hell's going on. Don't treat us like fools. Treat us like adult human beings that can take a lot of information in and decide for ourselves what's good and bad. I mean, that's what this is about.
Yeah.
I'll add to that. See, one of the things I say quite often is on, I don't know what like your TV is over there, but on a Saturday night or a Friday night, that was the night that everyone stayed in to watch the TV, the entertainment, and it's just drivel. It's just, it's demoralization, reality TV shows, Big Brother, whatever, the Britain's Got Talent or America's Got Talent. Why don't they stick on we've all been debating about what's been going on in the last 3 years. Why not have two experts up on a stage and put on a show for 2 hours and let the population watch it and make their own mind up? Or, even like the chemtrail theory, why not have experts go out onto a stage and debate on live TV and let the people decide for themselves? Or let's get the truth out there.
That would be the highest rated TV show of
Oh,
all time.
yeah.
That's a great idea.
Well, it would be. And
it would be huge.
What's funny is the response from, the Hollywood knuckleheads is that, that would be too hard. That would be too depressing. We can't do that.
Or they would say, but you can do that on the internet now, right?
Oh, of course.
You can get on and see.
What do you think Joe Rogan is?
Oh, yeah. That's same kind of thing.
Exact same thing. I think.
Or, what's his name?
I know you're talking about. Now I don't.
From the British guy.
Yeah, I know you're talking about, and I can't remember his name. Lex Friedman.
No, Lex is good too.
Oh.
No, anyway, there's a lot of great content out there, and putting it in front of the people that are listening to the Saturday Night Drivel would be a great idea, though, because those people that are watching, Britain's Got Talent and stuff, probably aren't jumping on the internet to watch long form podcasts. They might be on TikTok, it might be on Reels, something like that, but they're not listening to Lex, they're not listening to us, they're not listening to Joe. They're going, what's, is that guy going to go through the next round on British Got Talent?
Yeah.
So,
I would probably align with you. Yeah. And I wish there was more of that. But of course, in America specifically, we have an uncontrollable urge to manipulate in one direction. So I don't know if that will ever happen, unfortunately.
Well, in lieu of being able to do that, doing what we're doing today is, I was going to say the next best thing, but it's at least a thing in the right direction.